Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice. It's very good to be here once again in season 2 of Dojo Live. And as usual, we're broadcasting live from the beautiful Mexico City offices of Nearsoft. And I'm also honored to have host Kim Lantis, who she is in my teammate, little Kim Lantis. She's in the Admiral CEO headquarters, and also Matt Perez as a co-host for today's talk, and he's in California, in San Jose. Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Kim. And thank you for being part of this craziness called Dojo Live Season 2.
Thank you, Carlos.
All right. Today we have Dawna Jones. Dawna Jones as a special guest who, Dawna, I got to tell you that I'm also honored to have you in this, to help us jumpstart this new season of Dojo Live, which is going to be very focused on, as you know, we discussed earlier, in company culture and other relevant aspects. Dawna, welcome to the show.
It's a real honor to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. All right, guys. Well, Dawna, let me tell you briefly about Dawna. She's a specialist in transformational insights and advanced decision-making, leadership awareness for complexity. And, I think that today's topic, as Dawna has labeled it, is raising leadership consciousness to regenerate health. Well, as I normally do, I always ask the speakers the why question. Why they chose this particular topic, and of course it's related to their expertise, but it's always good to have the speaker themselves tell us about why they chose this particular topic and elaborate on it. So Dawna, would you please help us with elaborating on this particular topic, and we'll take it from there. Thank you, Dawna.
All right, thank you very much. Well, this whole began quite some time ago. I was raised in a environment where we had a close connection with the outdoors. And so what that means is you see big picture, you see systems. I mean, as long as you spend time in nature, your cognitive faculties are much more highly developed. The research shows that. Now, I didn't know that then, but I do now, and I'm grateful for it. But what it means also is that when you're in business, and I could watch this happening, you could see that things were changing, and socially, they're changing ecologically, they're changing on multiple levels, and business wasn't responding anywhere near fast enough. So the whole advantage of leadership consciousness is being able to, or decision-making consciousness at least, is to be able to see the big picture and be able to recognize how to adapt your decision-making and actually what you bring to the game, what you bring to your daily game to be more functional. You know, just to tap into a whole bunch of talent that gets really put on hold as long as you're in a more of the traditional business environment. So we're in a place and a time where society, there's certain indicators that say society's not well. The economy is dependent heavily on the environment, but the accounting systems that we've always had have kind of gotten rid of all things that you couldn't count. So they've just got rid of all those uncertainties. And that's coming back to bite us now because we're in an environment where it's never been more uncertain, it's never been more unpredictable, and it really asks us to be better as a species. So there you go. That's the short version of it.
the short path. Okay, good, cool.
Maybe that was too long. I don't know, but there you go.
No. Actually, it was perfect. All right. So let's see. We have assembled a series of additional questions that pertain to your chosen topic. But I would like to ask my teammate Kim to take it from there. Because she's the one who first assembled the questions. So please, Kim, ease away.
Perfect. I think, Dawna, one of the questions and the biggest questions we're looking for you to get us started is the idea of regenerating health. So can we start at that definition of what health would mean and that scale for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I ran around this house and found props, so you're going to be exposed to some of my props now.
Perfect.
It's really random.
Excellent.
But yeah, if we assume this is you or the individual, then how well things are depends on your individual health. mentally, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. So all the domains of your health. So that's it at a personal level. Now, when you scale that up organizationally, it's essentially the same thing from a fractal point of view. We're simply scaling it. It just gets more complicated when you work with an organization, because at an organization you have group things that happen. You have groupthink, you have a group emotion, and there's all of that. So health in a company is where you've got. Here, let me put it in terms of consciousness. At the lower level of consciousness, let's pretend this is your company. Your wellness is around: am I safe? Do I feel financially and emotionally secure? And am I safe emotionally, physically, all levels. So am I safe and am I secure? That's the big preoccupation for you. It's also the big preoccupation for your decisions. So, and Wells Fargo is a really good example right now. Really good example of when decisions get made around being safe and secure, looking after the self. You see a Wells Fargo. But as you move up through levels of consciousness and you rise above this need to gather whatever it is, security, and all of that, and when you move above that, you release trust in the organization, and you also release a lot of untapped talent. So it's the bring your whole self to work kind of conversation. And when you're in that place, then the real color can show itself. The real color of what's inside, the real hidden and deep potential of what's inside. And that's really where health steps in, because now you've got a company where people feel a sense of belonging, they feel a sense of higher purpose, they feel that they can contribute to that sense of higher purpose, and they also know that if something goes sideways on them personally, that the company will have their back. People around them will step up and support, and the company would step up and support. So they're not going to be tossed out because they're having a bad month. So organizationally, that's what it looks like. And we're going to know it works when we're actually living within our means at this level. Now, you have to pretend it's a lot bigger than it is. It's the only one I could find in the house. I was hoping for a globe, but I found this little rubber planet instead. So, but I mean, if we scale it up, we're thinking, do we have ecological systems in 100% health? And the short answer is we know we don't. The oceans are being depleted. We're eating what we call garbage fish now, and we're still dredging more. So we know that we put the planet at risk in a fairly short period of time. That's the role, the opportunity that business has in terms of raising consciousness, is to step up and choose a big, big goal. Not the quarterly report, which is really a teeny little goal, and honestly, it's not going to engage your heart in the process. You're just going to go, okay, it's a quarterly report. It's not going to engage any creative inspiration there. But when you look at saying, how can we regenerate water in our community? How can we restore health, or whatever level? Maybe it's at the society level or the community level or at the wealth level, and start redistributing wealth so there's prosperity amongst all levels of society. Those are the kinds of goals that really engage people in companies. And since the disengagement rates are ridiculously high, and the loss of productivity to disengagement is, like in the United States, $450 to $550 billion a year. Wow. There's lots of room for improvement. Lots of room. So there you go.
So if you talk about that scalability, I really like it. Like the idea of the individual, and then moving on to family or company culture, and then scaling that up to the planet. But I'm wondering, like, is there a give and take there? Like, where do we start first? Like the individual responsibility?
Yeah.
But then also giving back, like the company gives to the individual gives to the company gives to the world, the individual gives to the world gives to you. Like, is it linear? Is it cyclical? What does that look like?
Well, we used to, and that's a great question, because if you look at how we've always thought about our role on the planet, it's been linear, past, present, and future. But things are accelerating at such a speed now that it's a mashup. So it's much more cyclical now. Okay. It's much more looking like the spiral of the DNA, and I don't have an image of that handy, but it's much more looking at how we move up through levels of understanding, through levels of awareness, through levels of empathy and compassion. And so, yes, it always starts with, because that's the easiest place to start. You start with yourself, look in the mirror. Who am I? Who am I in this world? And here's a metaphor that I came up with. Yeah, this is for leadership, okay? So again, I'm making this up as I go. I hope it works. But if everybody sees themselves as a sheep in the flock, then you're going to wait for something to happen to you. That's a victim stance in the world. It's like I'm just waiting for life to go good or life to go bad or whatever version applies. But if you recognize that we're each unique individuals, and so I went through the house and found all the little cars I could. Turns out there's quite a few actually. So if you see yourself as individuals, what do these do? What do all of these have in common?
Four wheels. They move. They require energy.
Yeah, they all get you from point A to point B.
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah. I mean, all of the above. They each do it, but you can see they're not the same, are they? I mean, we don't have 5 or 6 Maggie trucks or whatever these are. You've got different versions of them, so each of them can perform a different contribution, make a different contribution. And this one carries a bunch of people. This one carries stuff. It's a storage. So it's the same way with people. We each bring something unique to the team. You bring something unique to the world you move through, to your family, to the world at large, and that's where you start to scale that unique difference. And of course, most people don't even know what it is because you're the last one to know. Everybody else around you will say, "Wow, you're really amazing at this," and you go, "Yeah," you take it for granted because you figure, as far as you're concerned, everybody's really good at that. That's actually not the case. That's something you're really good at, and it's unique to you, and it's innate. It's built in. It's not something you went to university with, you opened up your head, threw in a bunch of knowledge, and poof, all of a sudden you came out sounding like everyone else. No, it's something that's quite unique to you. It's innate talent and gift, and that's where you plug yourself into a team, you plug yourself into a company where you can contribute and make a difference. And then that company then says, well, let's do something meaningful at the society, ecological, or whatever level, and they plug in that. And it's really, if it's inspiring enough, then people can bring their whole selves to it. And if it's not inspiring, then you have a lot of disengagement. And that's what we're seeing in terms of consciousness. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
It certainly does. And that raises a question, if I may. And I'd like to ask you a question with Dawna. You teach us, or you tell us how to engage our inner skills, right? To guide us through what you label as unknown territory, and you also mention our unique skills. So sometimes we are. This is my personal take on this. Sometimes we are aware that we have unique skills. Sometimes we're not really too aware of that, of other specific skills that we may have. We need to find out what they are. We need to discover them. That's where the term unknown territory comes in, okay? And to me, sometimes become aware that there's unknown territory ahead of us. It happened to me, to be specific. It's a little bit on the scary side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So what sort of advice would you give our viewers to overcome this scariness of what uncharted, unknown territory is when it comes to engaging with our inner skills?
Well, there's a lot of answers to that. So I'll start with the first one, which is simple, because from a brain science point of view, certainty makes you feel safe and secure. And any uncertainty triggers the fight, flight, flee, holy moly part of the brain that just wants to keep you safe. So, but in real world, if certainty keeps you, gives you some confidence and security, in the uncertainty of the unknown territory gives you the growth edge. Because if you stay in a certain place all the time, always working in certainty, first of all, your decisions stagnate. You just run around in circles. Because again, that's brain science, it just runs around in ruts. But if you're in different environments, then you're adapting all the time to a different context. And that may sharpen your acuity. It may sharpen your sensory skills. I'm going to do something in Sweden at Agile People Sweden. This is a really crude drawing, so I wish I were an animator. But your body takes in information your brain takes in information at say 100 to 150 miles per hour, kilometers per hour, doesn't matter. But that idea, it's kind of slow. And so meanwhile, what's going on is your body, the field of energy that surrounds your body. And I don't know if you can see that in this magnificent drawing I've done.
Oh,
but
it
I
is.
tried to draw these lovely little, and so that's where your body's absorbing data from your field. It's absorbing social, emotional data. What are people thinking? How are people feeling? What's going on? And it's taking all of that in, and then it's building it into your decision. So if you're in a certain environment where everything is exactly the same, and operations tend to look like that to a large extent. Everything's the same, and it's predictable, and you can count on doing the same thing. Eventually, it's really hard to bump out and adjust to different realities as they emerge. So that's where those pivots become more challenging. But as you become more familiar, more comfortable with growing, with saying, I'm going to walk into a new position here, I'm going to have no idea what it's like, then you're giving yourself the chance to develop your comfort and trust in yourself to adapt. And you're bringing online more of you. You're bringing online your emotional intelligence, your social intelligence, all the various intelligences that we've made up over the years to rationalize who we are as human beings. But you're really bringing all that online and say, I'm going to use it all. I'm not just going to use the one that's on autopilot 24/7. I'm going to use all of what I've got and bring it together. So really good example that I wrote up not long ago in the Huffington Post for the great workplaces on the Huffington Post was the executive failure. New executives are failing at a fast rate. It's ridiculous. I think it's 50 to 75% failure. So why is that? Well, if they've come up from the operational level, this is only one reason, there's a bunch of them, but if they come up from the operational level where there's been predictability, there's been certainty in the decisions, they get into the executive level and it's strategic, it's conceptual. There's no certainty, there's nothing predictable about it. It's a 180-degree flip. So your opportunity by always moving yourself in unknown territory, whether it's into a different sector, a different job, a different whatever, wherever, as many places as you can find them without overloading yourself and blowing some gaskets. But if you can give yourself a chance to expand and to grow, then you're going to be much better equipped for those unanticipated interruptions, those things that just come out, at you from left field. And also you'll have the chance to see them coming too. You'll be able to see them better because you've got your head up. You're looking around. You're not down here with this narrow frame in your decisions. You've got a wide open lens and you're paying attention to what's going on in your world.
So what is it that a company could do to help develop that amongst their team members, amongst their employees? I think the first thing that comes to mind, at least my experience with Nearsoft, which has been very positive, and I think we touched on this prior to our talk, is the idea of vision. First of all, there needs to be company vision, and then the idea of we work very hard with what we call OKRs, the objectives and key results, so that as an individual you can align with that vision, and then it allows you kind of to step outside of yourself and to try something maybe a little new or think outside of the box, so to speak. What else is it that a company might be able to do to enforce that, or reinforce that rather?
Yeah, not force it as in count. But I'm glad you mentioned Nearsoft, because one of the things that Nearsoft has got going on for it that a lot of companies are having to figure out about now is that you've distributed power. So when you distribute power, you distribute decision-making, you distribute responsibility for how those goals get achieved. And in companies where there's hierarchy, and not to say hierarchy is just a structure, but most hierarchies have organized themselves around each position has a delegated and designated level of authority. Some by law, okay, fine, but you can still work around that. But also by design, that's the way they designed it. Now, as soon as you have that, you pull away responsibility. So people don't have to do anything. They don't have to step up because somebody else will carry the can for them. There's a whole lot of things that are created in that. So what you can do is decentralized decision making. It's a bit of a shock for the executives because they're used to controlling people, but it really steps down to what role can we each play in getting this work done, and working at it from that as opposed to using leadership as an authority. Fulcruming leadership off of authority. It's not. They're completely decoupled. and we say each of us has the power to lead. Now let's look at what we need to get rid of to allow us to do that in those traditional organizations. In Nearsoft, you've got a much greater advantage. So to your question, one of the easiest things to do for a company that's already working with distributed power framework is to simply say, hey, what's going on out there once a week? What's going on out there that is interesting, unusual, that caught my attention? It's novel. That's what the brain's always looking for. It's a novel. You know, bring it in. Let's talk about it. And if people did that, it was a couple weeks ago, well, it was actually about a month and a half ago, there was an interesting article in Gizmag, which is one of my favorite go-to places for this news, tech news. And that was about the first 3D printed office building coming out of Dubai. Now, how many construction companies read that? And how many construction companies went, interesting, because these things this tech is moving fast, you know? And if you think that's, oh yeah, but they're just experimenting in the corner of the world that's a long ways from here, well, just take a look at connectivity. With all the money. Yeah. Just look at the connectivity. Which is an
excuse I think a lot of people use. Well, they can afford to do that. I can't. Which limits.
But then they'd be ignoring the fact, and I put it in an article, actually, that I wrote up for Decision Making for Dummies. It was on the website, the Wiley's website, but it was a story of a 3D printer being used to print out prosthetic limbs in the Sudan. Now, this was done by a California company. They teamed up with Intel, who did the robotics, and another company. There's 3 companies involved. And they just flew all the parts over to the Sudan and started printing out prosthetics in the desert and then helping these kids adapt to. I mean, you know, you can imagine from a health point of view, if we look at health innovation, where that takes us.
Yeah, and it brings back full circle, like your idea of the individual, the company, the world. Like the scope of the vision of those companies is the reach is much further than their bottom line or even their company happiness. Like, what employee is not behind that? Who isn't excited about that? Like, we did this. Like, it's a great example.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think the first, I mean, not everyone can go to Sudan, of course, but then you start small, right? Like, we get together as a company, let's go paint a wall. Let's invite disadvantaged children to learn from something that we do at Nearsoft. Kids who might not have opportunities, who are interested in tech, they can have mentors with us, and there's ways to reach out to your community, and then you can scale that up.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it's done. Start at home. There's no shortage of places where kids don't have advantages and even if in rich homes, there's people with money, but they don't have the spirit. They don't have the community, you know, they may be missing, well, certainly rich kids don't tend to have the kind of community love and support that poorer families do because they know how to stick together. So there's a lot of learning that can happen between these different levels in society. And I think that's a huge opportunity and a role that business leadership can play to begin to take apart these walls that we have around, you know, money and around social status and all that stuff, and just say, look, we all live on the same planet. We need to be healthy here across the board. So that's a great example. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. I love that you brought it up. And I think it goes back full circle to your idea of, even if that was off the cuff for you, the sheep versus the automobiles. Because you look at a sheep and, like, how does a herd of sheep work? There might be one leader, there might be an individual, and then they all follow, oh, I guess we're going this way, which could or could not be a good thing. And so when you have the idea of cars, like, even though you said, okay, they take you from A to B, and together, maybe you decide your vision, we want to go to B. But let's find different ways to get there. And that's where the individuals get to be involved. It's like some might get there faster, some might get there slower, some might take a scenic route, and all of those things can help you decide which is the best way. And if you go as one solid herd, you could miss out on so much, you know? And so I think even your off-the-cuff example is a really, really, really great one, actually.
Thank you. Glad I found those cars. But it goes back to... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to jump in and ask you to expand more on, so how do you answer the question, or how do you answer the statement, or how do you address the statement? When people say, and I heard this last week, we had a client go through, they were really impressed with everything that everybody said, and at the end they said, God, this is great, and yeah, I could see where it works for you, but it probably won't work for other companies.
Oh, we've all heard this.
How do you address that one? What do you do besides what I do is I get pissed off. So what do you
Yeah, well, I understand that because there's a certain level of laziness that goes with that. It basically says, we're not creative enough, we're not inventive enough to try on anything new. We love the status quo so much, and we love being complacent so much that we don't want to adapt. And some companies have actually declared they'd rather die than actually make those adjustments. Similarly, we've got executives who are very close to retirement who are saying, I don't want to add any new tricks to my book. I've already, what I've done has gotten me to this point in my career. I'm 60 something. I've just got a few more years. I can just hang out. And in the same companies, you get the millennials calling up going, what's going on? Help. and because, my role as a consciousness coach is to help you navigate those kinds of contexts. But it's tricky. And so, I think from my point of view, we have a couple of things to face head on there, full on. And one of them is that we are extremely capable of adapting. If your company was going to die tomorrow, like Herman Miller was faced with, or Toyota was faced with, they could have just said, let's just close the doors. It's been a good ride. Let however many people we've got hired, we'll just let them all go. Or you can say, what are we not seeing? And this is where the insight part of the conversation comes in. Kim asked me before we started. What are we not seeing here that is a golden opportunity that's right in front of our eyes? Mm-hmm. And saying, let's just do that. So the other thing that I'm going to say to in response, Matt, is that one of the things I've watched in both Sociocracy and Sociocracy 3.0, my colleague James Priest, and in conversations we've had over in Sweden with CRISP, and Mikael Gotha, and also Holacracy, which is an interview that's just going up on the podcast, is that they always ask the question, is it safe enough to try? Because what you're hearing in that phraseology is, oh my gosh, it's new, it's scary, we might fail, I don't want to try, just in case we do. And so it's stepping back and saying, okay, well, let's pretend that you're good enough, smart enough, and creative enough to overcome everything that you're going to confront, to think it through, to feel it through, and to make those adjustments. Is it safe enough to at least try? And then knowing you don't have to be perfect, and success is on the journey. It's not in the outcome. So Tony Hsieh started implementing Holacracy in Zappos. Everybody went, oh, the sky is falling, anarchy, and off they went. No, that's not what's happening. They're taking it, they're adapting it. It's probably going to take a couple of years at least to make that fit. And it's like trying on a suit. Is it custom made, or do you take a ready-made suit and then adjust it? So I think really when you hear that kind of thing, they're really just basically saying we're afraid to try anything new for fear we fail at it. And the short answer is try, and is it safe enough to try it at least? Are you willing to at least have a shot at it, knowing there's no such thing as failure unless you fail to adapt and adjust from what you learn along the way?
And I think it's good too to bring out very successful examples of companies that it works for. I think you mentioned Doug Kirkpatrick. He's going to be a guest of ours on DojoLIVE eventually, and I was looking at his TED Talk, and one of the things that they started this idea of a democratic culture, a flat, organization, and with a company that I believe makes tomato paste. And he was mad. He was having a conversation, I think, with some business professor or something, and the comment was very similar to what you said. It was like, well, that would never work in a complex environment. And his idea was like, look, dude, like we do a lot more than smash tomatoes, like we have, we're agriculture, we're chemists, we're nutritionists, all kinds of things involved. Like it's a complex process and it works. And look at our growth, look at our numbers to prove it. And so I think also, can you think of any stellar examples of very successful companies or that use this, it works, people that encourage people to look into, check it out, trust us? Or for that matter, is there one example of somebody who's actually given it a shot and it hasn't worked?
Well, for self-management, I'm assuming that's what you're specifically looking at.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, thank you.
I don't know of any company that something has not worked. I mean, I've been gathering these stories up and putting them on my podcast, and I'm going to be launching a new podcast, and we'll be having more stories on that as well. They all take what they start. They all operate by the same principles that are human, both in terms of living systems, recognizing that we're managing a living system. It's not a machine. So yes, if you're trying to fix a part in an old company and you put the wrong part in, then you might risk failure. But you're a living system, so it's always adapting, it's always changing, it's always evolving, it's always emerging. And as long as you have that mindset that you're always working with what shows up, there is no such thing as failure. Absolutely not. So we've got Semco in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Maverick, written up by Ricardo Semler, one of the pioneers in this. We've got Morningstar that you mentioned with Doug Kirkpatrick, over 22 years of experience with self-management, 400 and some odd employees. Because that's the other thing people do is they go, oh, that only works for if you're 8 or you're 12 or you're 14 or pick a number. And so it's scalable. We've got Cocoon Projects is featured on there. Cocoon is an innovation company out of Italy. They started with 9, they're up to 30. And that's there's no job descriptions. It's a liquid organization. And so people move through. Matt Black Systems in the UK, they're also on that. It's a manufacturing company. They produce aeronautical, specific instruments. And I'm not coming up with the right term there, but anyway, they're a manufacturing company. And they've come up with something they call fractal evolution, which makes each person in the company an independent entrepreneur. And then they pool their resources for certain things. They share their resources for R&D, and they've invented that. They've made it up. Crisp in Sweden is an IT company, and they're doing a lot of consulting work. They just sort of distributed the CEO responsibilities to everybody else. They got rid of the position because legally they can. They don't need to have a CEO there, and their business model is very intentional and very specific and extremely successful, but measured by different terms, because they're not all out to win the big pile of money. They're into making enough money to have a great life and have a life.
I think that's a really key factor.
Yeah. So I mean, there's just tons of examples, and I'm getting new ones all the time, and it's just lovely.
The other poster child of big companies now that are self-managed is in the U.S. is W.L. Gore.
Yes. Yeah.
The people who go to Gore-Tex and all that. They're, I think, 50,000 people or something. It's pretty big. And they've been at it since the 50s, early 50s. I think they're almost as old as I am.
I have an interview with Michael Pakinowski on the podcast, and along with that, I have an interview with Kevin O'Brien, who worked for W.L. Gore, and he tells the story of coming in from a hierarchy, like a command and control organization, into W.L. Gore, and what he had to learn about leadership, making that jump, and it's a great conversation. So yeah, thank you for that. I absolutely.
They're pretty extreme. They actually elect their CEO. In other offers and stuff like that. And then there's in the Mondragon in Spain, there are 74,000 people, and they're a collective of co-ops, very successful in all kinds of different businesses. And of course, there's Zingerman in Albert, Michigan. They're very well known also for not flat. They're not flat, but they for self-management and then fully engage people and stuff like that. So there's plenty of opportunities. When people tell me about their growth and until you get bigger, and I tell people, look, we started this way when we were a couple of guys, and we're now almost 250 people, and it's still going, and I expect it to be that way when we're 1,000. So, but there's still that fear, and I think you nailed it. It's mostly fear.
Excuse me, Matt. I'm sorry to interrupt. I would just like to pause for a couple of seconds to remind the audience that you can send us your questions right here to our Twitter account, or Twitter handle, which is DojoLIVE, right here. Just send us your questions for Dawna. You can do it now during the broadcast or at a later time further down the road if you're watching in our channel. and we'll get back to you either way. So I just wanted to bring that up. And sorry, and I have another, if I may, I'd like to ask you a question, Dawna.
Sure.
Okay, cool. Okay, this is specifically about what you call inspired innovation. Okay. How do you release it? How do you help companies? How can you help a flat organization or a flat company, a non-hierarchical company just like Nearsoft, to release inspired innovation? What do you mean by this? Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, innovation's got a lot of baggage on it. In traditional companies, when you use the word innovation, it means just make a minor adjustment so it looks different, but it's still on a very linear track. It's nothing radically different. That's not the innovation I'm referring to. Inspired innovation is the kind that says, wow, let's do, like, as I say, if you tackle a planetary issue right now, or you tackle a big societal issue, a big goal. I think Google and XPRIZE are really good at sort of saying, look, tackle a big goal. You may not accomplish it, but you'll do a lot of important things along the way. And I think that's really key to remember. So you tackle a big goal, and if you don't have people rally around it, it's not inspiring. If you do have people rallying around it to do it, it's inspiring. It's fairly straightforward from that standpoint, at the risk of maybe oversimplifying it. But if you put up the sign, okay, we need you to meet our quarterly goal. Does that give the heart palpitations, or is it like, yeah, okay. So, inspirational is one of those things that engages the head, it engages the heart, it engages the energy in yourself, in your whole presence, your passion to come forward and just, do something radically different. And you're not even thinking about unknown territory at that point as a fear-based place to go. Unknown territory is the only place to go. It's the territory where innovation, inspired innovation takes place. It's not going to have anything to do with what we've already done in the past. It's going to be completely different. So it's bumping it up several exponential levels to get to a place where you go, where there's a lot of wows involved. And when I think of that, I think of these young people that are high school students that's out there cleaning up the ocean and are using some really simple technology, but it's just doing it. It's like not sitting around talking about doing, not thinking about doing. He just came up with this really cool, simple innovation is out there doing it. That's inspiring for me because I look at that and I thought that's a huge problem. We've dumped a lot of plastic in the ocean. We've suffocated a lot of marine species, and at the same time, we're depending on the oceans to feed us. So there's a little breach in the logic somewhere along there. And this kid just sort of says, I'm just going to go out there and fix that problem, and off he goes with this rather simple thing. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that are there, that are available to us. They don't look anything like what we've already done, but they work.
So is that the place you would suggest starting? Find a problem that's important to you?
Yeah, I think that companies need to do that. People need to know what their big goal, what their big purpose is, what their personal intent is, to put it in in the executive point of view. And if I'm just going to, I made up some things here, but if you look at systemic health as being an overall goal, okay, and then you sort of say, what's the big goal? What's the purpose that drives me? That's a personal question. But if you look at it from a company point of view and say, well, what is it, that drives us as a whole? And the example I use a lot when I'm doing talks, more recently at least, has been Novo Nordisk, and their big goal is systemic health. So from a decision-making point of view, they look at something and say, okay, will this create health, systemic health? Will this be, good for society, for people, our customers? They look at it from multiple levels, impact from multiple levels. That's important because you need some kind of anchor. There's been lots of things decisions have been made where the impact has never been considered. The impact on employees has not been considered. The impact on the customers has not been considered. And there are some...
Or the planet.
Or the planet. Exactly. So that's, that's where the big goal comes in, the big purpose, because it can also serve as your organizing principle for your decisions. Cool. And then you can go back to and say, well, okay, what do we want to do? We want to do something in the area of ecological health? Do we want to do something in the area of community prosperity? And I'm not going to use the word wealth because we associate that with in the hands of the few. And so that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that big goal is the thing that takes you from doing the mundane to doing the extraordinary, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you are in the organization.
And I think it's important that you say, like, there has to be that goal and the vision behind it, because the truth is people, at least the workforce, is not motivated by the bottom line. Because really that means nothing to me when you have traditionally CEOs walking away with tens of millions of dollars a year, and I walk away with 35,000 or whatever it might be. I don't care about this quarter or next quarter or the bottom line of the company. But if we're going to Sudan and we're giving, revolutionizing prosthetic limbs and giving children who would otherwise have no possibility of knowing what it is to eat with a fork, I can get behind that. Like, you're right. Like, so I think the vision that a company has to hand their big goal needs to go beyond, like you say, the wealth, the bottom line.
Well, and what's interesting about that is that when we first started talking about this, I mean, I've been working in this field now for 14 years. And when we started talking about this, you get things, well, you're anti-capitalist, there's all this kind of crazy response that happens. You're not making enough, you have to have money to eat. But what happens when you make decisions based on the money is that you completely ignore what creates it. So you ignore employee health and well-being. You ignore societal health and well-being. You ignore ecological health and well-being. You even ignore the balance sheet, half the balance sheet. And all you look at is cost. How much will this cost me? And you can tell a company that's thinking bigger when they say, well, if I invest this, I'll get that. So they're looking on two sides of the balance sheet. That's one of the markers of a company starting to make the shift away from thinking small, profit driven, to thinking big. So if we take an example, and I've used this a lot for those that have heard me already, but it's largely because it's the number I can remember. So I remember some more numbers, though this is going to be the story. But no, when Novo Nordisk did this in 2004, they gave themselves 10 years to reduce their carbon emissions by a specified amount. And they thought it would take them 10 years to get there. It took them 5 years, and they saved 7.9, I think it was 7.9 million, or I always get the millions and the billions confused, but euros.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. Or was it USD? At any rate, it's a big chunk of change. And so you add that to your bottom line, and what you soon discover is that companies that believe they're in business to make a profit don't perform anywhere near as well financially as companies that understand that they're there to serve something bigger. That's the research over and over and over again. Nothing new. It's there, but there's a belief system that's almost bordering on religious that says if you're not in business if your purpose isn't to make a profit, then
why are you in business?
Exactly. And they don't get that, no, it's actually the byproduct of doing something great.
I love that. So let's go back to that, like talking about health. So you mentioned some symptoms, so to speak, like symptoms of unhealthy, looking at just one side of the balance sheet, symptoms of healthy, looking at both sides of the balance sheet. So can we do maybe a side-by-side comparison so people can maybe identify where they might be on that spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest one is disengagement. In companies that think they're all about profit, as you said, money's not inspiring. It's a requirement. It's at the lower end of the scale of consciousness where we're looking after safety and security, but it's not a purpose. And Edwards Deming has said that quite clearly. So that's the one part of it. And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. That didn't take long.
Symptoms
comparison. Again? Yeah, thank you.
So I can tell which side of the spectrum I might be on.
Thank you. Disengagement on that one side, and on the other side, you bring your whole self to work. So really good example of that is companies that are on the profit side of them will have a whole lot more employees on their roster than companies who are engaged in a higher purpose that's inspiring. Why? Because people will bring more of themselves to work in an inspiring context and an inspiring purpose than you need to bring. So in other words, there's a lot of people who are just riding in the profit-driven company. They're just riding on the profit. And they're just, and I mean, that's nice in the sense that you could just go to work and get paid and all is well, but you're not using a fraction of what you have. Whereas in a company that has an inspiring sense of purpose, they're going to step in. So that's one comparison. The other one is stress-related illness. Stress-related illness in companies that are centered on profit and command and control, where there's a low sense of control about how things get done. There's an outlook that there's never enough scarcity. We're always having to get more and leverage getting more, as Wells Fargo nicely demonstrated just recently. So you've got stress-related illness. That means depression. It'll mean a whole bunch of things that the company is actually creating through how it is running its show, so to speak. But on the other side,
so if you find that your workforce tends to be sickly, it means more than likely your company is sick.
You want to look carefully at that, because that is context. That is the context that the people are making their decisions in. It's the context for creating health. And if you've got it wrong, you're going to have a high percentage of stress-related illness.
Excuse me,
depression,
Dawna?
and so forth. Yeah.
I'm sorry to jump in again, but we have some questions from the audience.
Sure.
And since we're approaching the final segment of the broadcast, I'd like to go over them. The first question is from Dan Feldman. Dan is asking you, how is the dispersion of decision-making authority related to enabling the full creative potential of all?
That goes back to, thanks, Dan. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that if the decision-making power is in rather one or two individuals, you don't have it the whole responsibility is delegated, and then it's where you get a lot of energy is being put into political influences and power struggles and all that kind of stuff. But when you disperse that decision-making down, you distribute the power into the rest of the organization, then the rest of the organization, everyone's responsible. And so that gives you, from a personal point of view and a personal spirit point of view, it gives you a higher level of sense of control. You're going to have a positive outlook on life because you have control over your life. You get to actually chart your course on that. And it inspires initiative, because you can actually take charge and do something and not be prepared to be hammered on through failure or whatever else. So, trust is an important factor in all of this.
Cool.
I hope that
Excellent.
answers Dan's question.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. But that's not it, because we have another question from Dan as well that I'd like to run by you before we run out of time. Okay, and the question is, how do we move the mindset of orgs from shareholder focused to all stakeholder focused?
This is one of the harder things, and I'm not sure we're moving it from shareholder focused to all stakeholder focused. I think we're really moving it from everyone benefits type of focus, because one of the systemic issues we have in large companies is that raising shareholder value increases what goes into the pocket of the chief executives, and Wells Fargo again is another poster child for that in the recent news. So I think what we're talking about here is attracting shareholders who aren't in their shared values. The values between the company and the shareholders are shared, and we do have those examples. They exist. It's not as if this is pie in the sky or anything else like that. We actually do have companies that are in line with that, but it's very much around. And Unilever, as you've seen this happen with Unilever, by the way, as you've seen Paul Pullman steer toward more of a purpose-driven company. They've got short-term shareholders who have been giving him a lot of grief over what he's doing, because in the long term they'll get, the returns are much higher to the approach that he's taking with Unilever. So it's not an easy answer. Again, it boils down to all of a sudden realizing that we're moving from the self to the whole, that it's not just about self-interest, it's about how can we restore health at every level. And that's a shareholder responsibility as much as it is any other stakeholder.
Excellent. Cool. Okay. We have a couple of other questions by Dan, but since like I said, we're approaching the final minutes of the broadcast, Matt, I'd like to pass on the mic to you, and I'll be right back with you, Dan. And so, Matt, do you have anything else for Dawna?
No, if we have questions from the audience, I'd rather that we address those.
Perfect. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. Well, okay. Dan is asking Dawna the following question. What real actions must companies take to increase sustainable engagement?
Sustainable engagement. I'm
Yes.
assuming that means sustainable engagement of employees. And I think the short answer is put the humongous goal up, like come to agreement on what's a big goal that you can collectively accomplish that you couldn't do alone. Because it's always that bigger goal that calls out more in people collectively than a small goal would ever do. It sort of says, yeah, this is inspiring enough that we really want to work together to accomplish this. So sustainable engagement boils down to not everybody participating. It's got to be voluntary. It's never compelled, because if it's compelled, it's not engagement. It's force. So we're really talking about empowerment, but we're talking about empowerment in the old structure, but in the new structure, it's about engagement and it's about inspiration. So it has to be something inspiring. It has to be something worth doing. It has to make a difference to the world. And obviously now we're moving away from the mental conversion, the mental version of pushing and forcing and to something that has more heart in it. It's a combination of we care about it, it makes a difference, and combined with intellectually we've got the horsepower to pull this off. That's the easy part. Intellectually we always have the horsepower to pull it off. But do we have the hard energy? Do we care? Is there empathy? Is there compassion? Do we have the glue that together we can pull this off? And that's really what sets these companies apart at the trust level, because they trust they do, and they trust in their people to do it. They figured out, as one person said, they hired them for a reason. So you don't tell them what to do. Just hire them, give them a goal, or work out what the goal is, share the goal together, and then get out of their way, because presumably you hired them because they were good at what they did.
Buckminster Fuller, many years ago, wrote that in the future, everybody's going to be a volunteer. And I think we're in the future now.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Indeed. And one more from Dan. Dawna, what relationships can orgs make with communities? Eunice. And that's the word that he typed in is Eunice, E-U-N-I-S, and please, I apologize because English is my second language, so I don't know if I just pronounced it correctly. Eunice?
Well, it's my first and I still don't know, so.
Eunice and governments. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, anyway, let me go back. What relationships can orgs make with communities, Eunice, and governments to create virtuous cycles of health?
I'm guessing, I'm maybe saying universities in there. Maybe it's short for universities. So, I think a whole lot of what's going to get done now is done through partnerships. And I think that's, again, going to be based on where can we accomplish something together that we couldn't do alone. So what partnerships do we need? And we've got some really good examples documented, with Mohammed Grameen and different combinations of characters that put things together. Unilever's got some good examples in the Brontes River where they did the community cleanup, but they didn't bring any money into the equation. They just brought in expertise, and they partnered up with a couple of local associations. So I think that's wide open. The kind of partnerships that take place are ones that say, what do we each bring to the table that we can use to leverage a better outcome for everyone here, and do that. So it's going to be very situational, but it's definitely going to be a matter of being interdisciplinary and embracing diversity, because if you can't embrace diversity, if you're still running off of unconscious bias against or for, like letting that play out, you're hamstringing yourself, you're tying yourself up. So by being aware of the fact that diversity is critical, and then by training yourself to work with those deeper biases and clearing those out of the way, or training collectively, then you've got the chance to forge those kinds of partnerships, because that's what it takes. It takes that understanding that diversity is powerful and essential.
Excellent. Oh, and by the way, thank you, Dan. Dan just clarified that UNIS means universities. That's like a abbreviation. So it stands for universities.
You got it. Gold star.
Well,
dark chocolate.
It was Dan. I mean, he was kind enough to send me a message and just say, means universities, you dummy.
But on that note, university.
I didn't know either. All right. Are we 3 for 4 or 4 for 4 that we weren't quite sure?
Yeah.
I think on that note, universities are really behind right now. And they're behind because they've got some systemic patterns that are really hard to break. So I need to mention the work of the Global Responsible Leadership Initiative. The executive director is John North. We have a program on the Evolutionary Provocateur podcast that describes what business schools are doing worldwide. Not many of them, but like less than 50, but they are doing some very innovative work. And so when we talk about universities, we really have to ask the universities to step to the plate, because they can't do it using the old methods. It's just, they don't work. You really have to be thinking differently to function in today's world. And I think there's a lot of room for opportunity there at the university level.
Cool. Dawna, unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I'd like to take advantage of the last few remaining minutes, because I understand that you have a lot to share with your audience today. You have a book, you have other items that I would encourage you to please share with our audience, so we can get to know where to find you.
All right. Well, thank you. What the book that Carlos is referring to is Decision Making for Dummies. If you judged a book by its cover, you'd be misled. Because it's not for dummies. It has the science of intuition in it. It has the science of subconscious information processing that I was referring to earlier in the conversation. There's a whole chapter on ethics. How do you design a company for ethical decision making from the get-go? So there's a lot of personal growth in there. Yes, it's written for business, but there's an awful lot of stuff there that applies to business, like including how do you use mistakes to expand. So there's a lot of consciousness information in there without using the word. But it's just built into how do we think about things, how do we expand who we are because things went sideways, which is a helpful thing, and how do we build in some participatory process. So of course there's the usual thing on participatory decision making and some of the tools there as well, because that has to be much more intentional. In the past we've always just let decisions happen. You can't do that anymore, not in an environment of complexity. So. And then I also have my website, which is FromInsightToAction.com. I am doing a lot more work in the area of consciousness coaching. I hadn't actually planned on doing that, but it works for both people and for groups. So it's really, I'm in a new context. How do I adapt myself to fit? But I'm also doing workshops and speaking, as I mentioned, as well. So I'm really happy to talk to people about that. And I think, and then I'm closing down the Evolutionary Provocateur podcast at the end of October-ish. And I'm starting a new one up called From Insight to Action. I'll have an interview with Matt on that one. It's called Insight to Action Podcast, and it'll probably launch it this week sometime with luck, and it'll be weekly. And so weekly and regularly scheduled, so that'll be exciting. But I think really what we're doing here is to co-create things. And I think can you read that?
We can't, I can't, I'm not
Let's
sure.
change the world together, it says.
Okay.
It's a picture I found, and I thought it was kind of appropriate. So there you go. You know, if you are in the center as the leader, and we've got all these opportunities swimming around us, I think really it's how do each of us step forward into that? How do we collectively step forward into the opportunities, and then really work together to co-create something much better? And that's what I stand for, co-creating a better world.
Cool. That was awesome, Dawna. I appreciate it. Any other contact info that you might want to share with your audience?
No, I mean, From Insight to Action is the website. Mm-hmm. It's on the lower third there.
Right here? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there. And yeah, I'm just email me or catch me on Twitter at EP Dawna Jones on Twitter. So, and there's a blog I'm publishing on Huffington Post. I'm publishing on LinkedIn, so connect me on LinkedIn. Love to chat, and I appreciate very, very much the chance to do this with you. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're honored to have had you here, and it's all good things must come to an end sooner or later, so this was no exception. Dawna, thank you so much for having agreed to be here with us today and sharing your views and your expertise. And as ever, thank you, Kim, and thank you, Matt. And stay tuned for the upcoming episodes of Season 2 right here on DojoLIVE. So it's dojo.nearsoft.com.
Thank you, Dawna.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure getting to speak with you and getting to know you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And, well, you have a great day. And, folks, everyone out there listening and viewing, thank you so much. Stay tuned for more.
Thanks, Dawna.
Till next time. Bye.
Bye.